Kyle Forgeard, the CEO of Nelk and the Full Send podcast, has dealt with some tricky situations in the past when it comes to Nelk Full Send. The first incident that would spring to your mind is the Bob Menery situation and how that all unfolded. And it appears something similar could be happening with Steiny. Was it because of the Andrew Schulz episode or his behavior over time on the podcast? We'll be checking out all the key details in today's video, so make sure to stick around till the end for all the info. After an 8-month wait, the Nelk boys have finally published their much-anticipated podcast episode with Andrew Schulz, and they're willing to record another. It doesn't take long for listeners to demand access to an unpublished episode when a podcaster claims to have one in their archive. In the instance of the Nelk boys, however, that resulted from their manager John Shahidi's admission that they had a taped episode with Andrew Schulz that had not yet been released. The episode was recorded in November 2022, when Schulz spent an hour with the YouTube crew. The comedian said on his podcast that he felt trolled by Steiny, and that he mistakenly believed he was supposed to be interviewing the YouTubers at one point. Additionally, there were several videos that showed Schulz and Steiny squabbling, albeit it never developed into a heated confrontation. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the post notification bell. This way you'll never miss out on any future celebrity videos similar to these. The podcast has been made public on Twitter under the handle Nelk Boys, as Steve Will Dalt, who is banned from YouTube, appears in it. It also contained a note from Kyle Forgeard expressing regret about Schulz's perception that things went wrong. With this one, it was our first time having a comedian on. We kind of wanted to treat it like a boys-only episode where it's our internals and we just chill, bro down, and talk about whatever is going on in the world. And we thought that would be a good way to do Schulz, Kyle said. This is the first time where a guest didn't enjoy themselves on the podcast, which honestly sucks for me to hear that, because we obviously want every guest to have a good time, and we were excited to have Schulz on. Despite the fact that not everyone wanted the episode to be aired, Kyle said he always wanted it to air and didn't want to wait more than 8 months to release it. However, they chose to release it when Schulz persuaded them to do so. Before they made the episode public, both Steiny and Kyle spoke about the incident on their most recent podcast on YouTube featuring Aiden Ross and Rice Gum, which then a few days later led to the release of it.
Basically, when we did the pod with Schulz, I don't know exactly what happened between you and him or whatever, but I think the vibe was just off for some reason. I don't know whose fault it was. I don't know if it was like all your fault, but either way, Steiny and Schulz like completely went at it.
I don't even know if I went back at it.
I think he thought that, like, I don't really think he, like, he didn't really know you that well as well.
That's the whole thing.
Like, I think he knew me and he knew Steve, and you were kind of just starting out on the pod.
Well, that's the thing that
so,
people
like,
don't realize. This was fucking filmed 7-8 months ago.
Yeah, it was filmed a long time ago.
Now, having seen the podcast with Andrew Schulz, you could easily argue both sides. The Steiny was asking generic questions throughout, but then you could say Schulz was being stuck up, and if it wasn't for Steiny, let's be real, Kyle and Steve hardly would have kept the podcast flowing. The majority of fans' stance on the episode was that of defending Schulz and stating how it was a long time coming before someone called out Steiny and the rest of the team. Schulz is actually spot on. It's the whole team. They come unprepared, ask generic questions, and in some instances seem disinterested in their guest. He's actually being real, ASF. Not even bullying the guy, just giving him actual advice. Only your true friends will tell you how it is like this. Steiny certainly needs to have a deep look at himself. He's constantly acting like the victim, which makes him completely unable to take constructive criticism. And I wonder why he's even been a part of Nelk for so long, despite being such a flawed person. The fact that Kyle didn't realize Andrew was talking about his whole operation and not just Steiny is the best part. LOL. That was one part of the show which was quite awkward, as of course the majority of Schulz's points were aimed at Steiny, but he was also simultaneously calling out the Nelk boys for how they handled their podcast in general, and that the entire time he was there felt like an ad for Happy Dad. At one point in the podcast, Andrew Schulz literally says to them that he isn't having a good time because of the effort they're all putting in, which, to be fair, he is right, as the majority of the time it was Steiny having to pull all the questions out.
Why? You don't think we're doing a good job of that?
No, not really. I mean, it's not my favorite.
Is this a joke? I don't understand.
Right? Like, I don't know. Like, are you guys having a good time?
I was until that comment.
Is this what it's normally like?
No, I mean, I was having a good time.
Okay.
Although, to see both sides to it, a lot of people did seem to defend Steiny, as although he didn't do the best job when it came to questions in Schulz's eyes, out of the trio, he did try to keep things flowing and became the brunt of the backlash. Now, why does Steiny take the brunt of it when it's clearly not solely his fault? They keep him around as a scapegoat. They're not real friends. People might hate on Steiny, but he was the only man in the room not deflecting the insults by laughing and actually asking what's up. Kyle hates Steiny too. What are your guys' honest thoughts on this entire situation? Now you've seen the podcast. Does the backlash Steiny is currently receiving seem warranted, or are people massively overreacting? Comment below. In a clip we checked out in yesterday's video, Andrew Schulz even questioned if they were friends, which was the funniest part, as if you're watching them for the first time, it could definitely appear as if they're strictly business partners. If you would remember, towards the start of the year was when the Bob Menery scandal happened, and Kyle ended up having to address the entire situation because of all the backlash he was receiving, as Bob claimed that Kyle owed him a lot of unpaid money for his time on the podcast.
So first things first, Bob is saying on social media that we owe him money. That is a complete lie. We don't owe Bob Menery a cent. He's also saying that he had the worst deal, a terrible deal for the podcast. But guys, in the 10 months that he was on the show, he made $1.2 million. $1.2 million in 10 months.
It was pretty evident in that situation Bob Menery was the one making stuff up, as if you're receiving $1.2 million for a podcast show you were on for 10 months, that's mental. When Bob broke his silence on his perspective on how things went down, it's clear he felt he was done dirty. Bro, for that Full Send podcast, I built the effing thing with Kyle. You know I built it. There's no debate there. We brought in, like I said, I gave my all. When I talked to Kyle, too, about doing this show originally, I wanted to be able to help bring the show and them more mainstream. You know, because they had their prank videos, and they were obviously evolving into the Seltzer stuff and all that different stuff. Comparing it to the Steiny situation now is interesting, because as all of you would know, Steiny made it onto the Full Send podcast because of Bob Menery. It would only seem right now that Steiny has his Bob moment, and in a few months comes out and states he's owed money from his time on the podcast. Anyway, this concludes today's video. Be sure to subscribe to LoafTube for future celebrity videos, and turn on that post notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads. Until then, see you in the next one.